My ex, his lover, and her husband. It feels like it's finally time for me to tell this story on the internet. Not because I want attention or validation, but because it has been sitting inside me for so long, quietly shaping how I see people, relationships, and even myself. And every time I think about it, I still get that same strange feeling in my chest, like something between disbelief and clarity. Because what happened didn't just surprise me, it genuinely took my breath away in a way I didn't think real-life situations could. And at this point, I've made peace with the fact that people will have opinions. Strong ones even, and honestly, you're completely free to think whatever you want about it. Before I go any further, I feel like I need to say this clearly. Every name in this story is fake, and the ages I'm mentioning are accurate for that exact moment in time, which means everyone is older now by about 4 years. And I also want to acknowledge something important. I know for a fact that if the other people involved were to tell this story, it would probably sound very different, maybe even completely opposite in some parts. Because perspective changes everything, but this is how I experienced it, how I felt it, and how I understood it while I was living through it. About 4 years ago, my husband and I were forced to leave our home country because of war. And even now, saying that out loud still feels surreal. Because one day you have a life, routines, familiar streets, people who know you, and the next, everything is gone or no longer safe, and you're suddenly in survival mode, trying to make decisions that don't feel like choices at all. And in the middle of that chaos, the company I worked for offered relocation options, which ended up being our only real chance at starting over. So that's how we found ourselves in a country in Southern Europe, completely unfamiliar with everything around us. No language, no friends, no sense of belonging, and nothing stable to hold on to from the past. I still remember our very first day there so clearly, almost like a scene frozen in time, because that's the day I saw her for the first time, Natalie, and something about that moment stuck with me in a way I didn't question back then. But now, looking back, it feels almost symbolic, like the beginning of something I couldn't yet understand, because she was just sitting there so casually on a bar stool outside a conference room, smoking, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of how significant she would become in my life. And for some reason, without overthinking it, I walked up to her and asked if I could join her for a smoke. When she said yes, it felt like such a small, ordinary moment, but it opened the door to everything that followed. And within just a few minutes, our husbands joined us, mine, Henry, and hers. Chris, and what started as a simple interaction quickly turned into something deeper, because there was this immediate, almost effortless connection between the four of us, like we didn't have to try too hard to understand each other. Maybe because we were all in the same situation, all displaced, all trying to rebuild something from nothing, and somehow that shared experience made everything feel easier, warmer, and more real. From that first meeting, everything seemed to fall into place almost too naturally, like one of those rare situations where you don't have to force conversation or connection, because it just flows on its own. And before I even realized it, we were no longer just acquaintances who happened to meet on the first day in a new country, but something closer, 4 people who found comfort in each other in a place where nothing else felt familiar. And I remember thinking at the time how lucky we were, because not everyone gets that kind of instant understanding, that kind of shared rhythm, especially when you're all trying to rebuild your lives from scratch. And maybe that's why I let my guard down so quickly, because it felt safe, it felt easy, and more importantly, it felt like we needed each other. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, we naturally became part of each other's daily lives, not in a forced or planned way, but in that quiet, gradual way where people just start showing up more often, texting more, inviting each other out without overthinking it. And suddenly you realize you've built a routine together, late nights, at bars where conversations stretched longer than intended, slow mornings over coffee where no one felt the need to rush, small celebrations that didn't need a reason, and bigger ones like Christmas that I organized at my place, where for a moment it felt like we had recreated something we lost, something that resembled home. And somewhere along the way, without even noticing when exactly it happened, I stopped thinking of them as just friends and started seeing them as something much closer, something like a chosen family that made the unfamiliar feel a little less heavy. Eventually, our little circle expanded, when 2 more people joined, one of Chris's friends and his local girlfriend. And while that changed the dynamic slightly, adding new energy and different personalities into the mix. It didn't take away from the bond I felt with Natalie and Chris. Because with them, it was different, deeper somehow, like there was an understanding that went beyond shared situations. And even though we were now a group of 6, laughing together, traveling together, creating more memories, there was always this quiet awareness in me that if I had to choose who I felt closest to, it would still be them. And at the time, that felt like something positive, something I was grateful for, not something I would later question. Looking back now, I often catch myself thinking about how I used to describe my marriage during that time. Because I would say things like, "we're good," or "we're stable." And back then, I genuinely believed it, or at least I wanted to believe it. Because compared to everything we had been through, the relocation, the uncertainty, the financial struggles after Henry lost his job and then found another, with much lower income, the pressure of me becoming the sole provider for a while, we did function well as a team. We supported each other in practical ways. We solved problems together, and from the outside, it probably looked like we were doing exactly what a strong couple is supposed to do. But somewhere underneath all of that, there was something quieter, something less visible, something that didn't feel quite right. And I think I ignored it for a long time, because I didn't know how to face it without risking everything we had built. At the same time, I had continued therapy even after we relocated, which at first felt like just another way to stay grounded in an unfamiliar environment. But over time, it started to shift something in me, because therapy has a way of making you see things you once overlooked, or accepted without question. And slowly, almost subtly, I began noticing patterns in my marriage that I hadn't fully acknowledged before. Small things at first, like how often I felt unheard, how easily my needs were brushed aside, how I would adjust myself to keep the peace. And then bigger realizations started forming, the kind that you can't unsee once they're there. And even though nothing dramatic had happened yet, I could feel that something inside me was changing. Like I was waking up to a version of my life that I hadn't fully examined before. And that realization, as quiet as it was, would eventually become impossible to ignore. It didn't happen all at once, and that's probably why it took me so long to fully recognize it. But over time, I started to feel this quiet, persistent absence in my relationship with Henry, not something dramatic or explosive, but something subtle and constant, like a background noise you eventually realize has always been there. Because even when we were physically together, even when we shared space, meals, routines, I often felt like I wasn't really seen by him in the way I needed to be, like my presence in his life was acknowledged but not truly valued. And I remember having these small moments where I would catch myself wondering, almost instinctively, if I stopped trying, would anything between us actually remain? And that thought, once it appeared, didn't leave easily. There were still warm moments between us. Of course, moments that made me question my own doubts. Moments that felt familiar and safe and almost convincing enough to make me believe that everything was fine. But even those moments started to feel incomplete, like they were happening on the surface while something deeper remained untouched. And intimacy, especially physical intimacy, became something I agreed to more than something I fully felt, because Henry often insisted that a relationship couldn't exist without it. And I didn't want to lose what we had, so I went along with it, telling myself that maybe this was normal. Maybe this was just what long-term relationships looked like, even though, deep down, there was a part of me that felt increasingly disconnected, like I was participating in something that no longer fully included me emotionally. Eventually, that quiet discomfort started turning into something harder to ignore, something that pushed me to speak up, even though I knew from experience that those conversations rarely led anywhere meaningful, because Henry didn't like talking about feelings, didn't engage with them in a way that felt mutual. So every time I tried to express what I was missing, what I needed, it felt less like a conversation and more like I was speaking into a space that didn't respond. And I would sit there explaining, choosing my words carefully, hoping that maybe this time something would shift, that maybe this time he would meet me halfway, but instead, it often felt like I was alone in those moments, carrying the weight of both the problem and the effort to solve it. Still, I didn't stop trying. In fact, if anything, I tried harder. Because there's something about loving someone that makes you believe effort can fix what feels broken. So I leaned into his world more. I took interest in his hobbies, listened attentively to everything he shared about work, his ideas, his plans for the future, even when those plans rarely turned into action. and I supported him in ways that felt natural to me, thinking that maybe if I showed up fully, if I gave enough, if I made myself present in every corner of his life, something would shift in return. But there was one detail that stayed with me in a way I couldn't fully explain at the time. Whenever he talked about his future, about the life he imagined, I was never clearly a part of it. Not in a direct, intentional way, and I told myself not to overthink it. But the absence was there, quietly settling into my awareness. By the time spring came around last year, I reached a point where I felt emotionally exhausted in a way that rest alone couldn't fix. Because it wasn't just about being tired, it was about feeling drained from constantly trying to hold something together that no longer felt balanced. And that's when I realized I needed space. Not from him specifically, but from everything. From the dynamic we had fallen into, from the version of myself I had become within it. And that's why I decided to take a vacation alone. Something that might seem simple on the surface, but for me, it felt like a necessary step toward reconnecting with myself, toward understanding what I actually felt when I wasn't actively trying to make the relationship work, even though a part of me already sensed that what I would find in that silence might not be easy to face. When I told Henry that I wanted to go on vacation alone, I tried to explain it in the clearest, calmest way I could, choosing my words carefully so he wouldn't misunderstand my intentions. Because it wasn't about escaping him or creating distance between us. It was about trying to find myself again somewhere outside of the constant effort I had been putting into the relationship. But despite everything I said, he didn't take it well. And what followed wasn't just one disagreement, but several layered conversations that circled around the same point without ever really resolving it. Because for him, the idea of me choosing to be alone, even temporarily, felt unnecessary, maybe even threatening in a way he didn't fully express. And for me, his resistance only made it clearer how much I needed that space, not as a rejection of him, but as a way to understand what was happening inside me without the noise of everything else. Eventually, after those repeated conversations that felt more draining than productive, he agreed, and not just reluctantly, but in a way that almost confused me, because he even offered to pay for a nice hotel, which on the surface seemed supportive, generous even, but something about it felt slightly off, like the gesture didn't fully match the tension that had come before it. And I remember holding both feelings at once, gratitude for the gesture, and a quiet unease that I couldn't quite explain. Because sometimes it's not what someone does, but how it feels underneath that stays with you, even if you can't yet put it into words. When I finally went on that vacation, I had this quiet hope, maybe unrealistic, but still present, that being alone in a new environment, away from routine, away from expectations, would somehow bring clarity or relief. But instead, what I found was something much heavier, because without distractions, without the constant motion of daily life, I was left alone with my thoughts in a way that felt almost overwhelming. And instead of feeling reconnected, I felt more aware of everything that had been building inside me. Every doubt, every question, every emotion I had been pushing aside, and it didn't resolve anything. It only made it harder to ignore. Like turning up the volume on something I had been trying to keep quiet. Coming back home didn't bring comfort either. And I remember noticing it almost immediately. Not in anything obvious or dramatic, but in something much subtler. In the way Henry greeted me, in the way he spoke, in the space between us that felt slightly different from before. Like something had shifted while I was gone. Even if neither of us said it out loud. And he acted like he was happy to see me. Said the right things. Did what was expected. But there was this underlying distance that I couldn't ignore. This feeling that I was returning to something that no longer felt entirely the same. And even though I had experienced moments of disconnection before, this felt different, quieter but deeper, like something had already started changing without me fully realizing it. The next day, when we went out for brunch, everything seemed normal at first. Almost deliberately normal, like we were both following a script of how things were supposed to look. Until halfway through the meal, when Henry suddenly paused, pressed his lips together in a way that immediately made something in me tense up, and said, "I need to tell you something." And in that moment, everything inside me seemed to react at once. My body felt warm. My thoughts slowed down, and strangely, beneath the rising anxiety, there was also a sense of calm, like a quiet, instinctive recognition that whatever he was about to say would explain the feeling I had been carrying, the one I couldn't fully name until that exact moment. And then he said it simply, almost too simply for the weight it carried. He told me that he had fallen in love, and not just in some vague or passing way, but in a way that felt real to him. And when he said her name, Natalie, it was like something inside me both shattered and settled at the same time. Because on one hand, it was shocking, disorienting, almost unreal to hear it spoken out loud like that. And on the other hand, there was this quiet, almost uncomfortable clarity, like a part of me had already sensed it before he ever confirmed it, and somehow that made it both easier and harder to process all at once. He didn't stop there. He explained that she felt the same way, that it wasn't one-sided, and then added something that seemed, in his mind, to make the situation more acceptable, more manageable, that Chris knew about it, and that their relationship was open. And I remember trying to hold on to that detail, almost like it was supposed to help me understand, supposed to make everything feel less like betrayal and more like something different, something that didn't fit into the usual definitions. But the truth was, no matter how it was framed, I was still sitting there, hearing that my husband was in love with someone else, someone we both knew, someone who had been part of our lives, our routines, our shared space. What surprised me the most, even in that moment, was not just what he said, but how I reacted to it. Because instead of immediately breaking down or walking away, I felt this strange, almost controlled stillness take over. Like my mind shifted into a mode where the priority wasn't reacting emotionally but holding everything together. Understanding what this meant, what options existed, what could still be preserved. And I think a big part of that came from the fact that he told me he wasn't leaving me, that he still wanted our relationship just alongside something else. And that idea, as complicated and painful as it was, gave me something to hold on to in that moment. We talked more that day than we probably had in our entire relationship, going over things we had never fully addressed before, and even though I was still processing everything, still trying to catch up with what I was feeling, I found myself engaging in the conversation in a way that felt almost practical, almost structured, like I was trying to build some kind of framework that would keep everything from collapsing. And that's when I set boundaries, clear ones, at least in my mind, that their connection could exist, but only within limits, only in ways that I felt I could handle. Like talking, spending time together in public, holding hands, but nothing beyond that, nothing that would cross a line I wasn't ready to accept. And what made it even more confusing was that he agreed, without much resistance at that point, and for a brief moment, it created this illusion that maybe, somehow, we were handling this in a mature, controlled way, like we were navigating something unconventional, but not necessarily destructive. And I remember holding on to that feeling, even if it was fragile, because it allowed me to believe that I wasn't losing everything all at once. That maybe there was still a version of my life, of my relationship, that could continue to exist, even if it looked very different from what I had originally imagined. For a while, I truly tried to live inside that version of reality we had created, the one where everything was supposedly understood, discussed and agreed upon, and on the surface, it even looked functional. We still spent time together as a group. I spoke with Natalie and Chris as if nothing fundamental had changed. We celebrated small milestones, shared meals, even went on a vacation together with our extended circle. And there were moments, brief but convincing, where I allowed myself to believe that maybe this could work, that maybe this strange, carefully balanced arrangement was something we could sustain if everyone stayed, respectful of the boundaries, if everyone stayed honest, if everyone cared enough not to let it fall apart. But reality doesn't stay quiet forever, and it started revealing itself not through one big moment, but through small, almost unnoticeable shifts that slowly became impossible to ignore, like the way Henry began putting effort into his appearance again. But not for me, for her, the way he would stand in front of me and ask if he looked good. Before going to see Natalie, something he hadn't done in a long time in our relationship, and I remember answering him, participating in that moment as if it was normal, while something inside me quietly tightened, because it forced me to confront a truth I didn't want to fully accept, that the version of him I had been trying to reach for so long was now being given, naturally, to someone else. When he went out to meet her, he would remind me that I could text him anytime, that he would be there if I needed him, but I never did, not because I didn't need him, but because I already knew that reaching out wouldn't change how I felt. So instead, I stayed in our home, sitting with thoughts that grew louder the longer I tried to ignore them, imagining where they were, what they were doing, replaying every detail I knew, checking his location even though I told myself I wouldn't, and crying in a way that felt quiet but constant, like something inside me was slowly breaking down piece by piece while everything on the outside still looked controlled. At the same time, contradictions began to appear more clearly. Henry started showing more interest in physical closeness with me again, suggesting new things for us to try, creating moments that, on the surface, looked like effort, like reconnection. But underneath it all, there was also pressure, because he began pushing against the boundaries I had set, questioning them, telling me it wasn't fair that I was the one deciding what he could or couldn't do. And even though I stood my ground, even though I repeated my limits calmly and clearly, I could feel that the balance we had created was already shifting, that what I had agreed to as a way to preserve something was slowly turning into something that was asking me to give up even more of myself. The moment it finally ended wasn't dramatic in the way people might expect. It didn't come with shouting or chaos, but it was definitive, because when he asked me, about a month before our 5th wedding anniversary, what would happen if he wanted more than what we had agreed on, I answered honestly, maybe more honestly than I had been with myself for a long time, and I told him that would be the end of us. And when he simply replied, then it's the end, it felt less like a sudden break and more like the confirmation of something I had already known deep down, because by that point, I had already started to see the pattern, not just in what was happening now, but in everything that had led up to it. The emotional distance, the imbalance, the effort that mostly came from my side, even the way our relationship had started, before he had fully ended his previous one, and in the months that followed, as we separated, as friendships faded, as everything we had built unraveled piece by piece, I found myself standing in a life that looked completely different from what I once imagined, in a foreign country, without the people I thought were my family, but at the same time, with something I hadn't fully had before, clarity. The kind that doesn't come easily. The kind that comes from loss, from reflection, from finally seeing things without trying to reshape them into something they're not. And even though I'm still processing everything, still rebuilding, still figuring out what comes next, I know this much now. I gave everything I could to that relationship. I stayed, I tried. I endured, and in the end, I didn't lose myself. I found the boundaries I didn't know I needed, and the understanding that love, real love, shouldn't require you to disappear just to make it work.